This is very exciting for me because it's very nice to see so many familiar faces. So let me introduce you to your panelists. We have Samyuktha Varma and Radhika Viswanathan of the podcast City of Women, Guimarães and Sarah Azoubel of 37 Graus, and Isabel Cadenas Cañón and Laura Casielles of De Eso No Se Habla. Give them a round of applause. Yay. Okay, cool. Good to see you all panelists. So we're gonna get started with some introductions. If you guys can go around and do like a 3 to 4 minute introduction, we'll go around and then I'll follow up with some questions. Okay, Sam and Radhika, do you guys want to take it away?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, PRX, for having us. We're quite excited. I'm Radhika Viswanathan. I am the co-founder of a podcast production company based out of Bangalore, India, called Vaaka Media. That's VAAKA. And we were part of the Vaaka, that's VAKA Media. We were part of the Google Podcast Creator Program in its second cohort. I think it was the first international cohort. And we worked on a podcast called City of Women. Samyuktha and I have both worked in development communication and research for many years, and we have been making podcasts since 2017 or 2016 now. And we began with a podcast called In the Field, which is about development and India. And since then, we, of course, have had City of Women, part of this program, and now we run a company that makes podcasts. Generally narrative, long form, immersive kind of podcasts. We have 5 shows or 6 shows, if I'm not wrong, that we have made so far. We're really excited to be here because City of Women is in its, the first series is running right now. We dropped our 5th or 6th episode yesterday. And I don't know if there's anything else to add, Samyuktha, would you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Samyuktha Varma, the other half of Vaaka Media and the other half of City of Women. So City of Women is a show. I'll just tell you a little bit about the show since the other stuff's been covered. The show is about how women navigate urban life. It's based on our city, although it was originally meant to be based on our city, but since the lockdown, we've kind of opened it up. And so we talk to women from across the country about stories and incidents and experiences that kind of capture the kind of mental acrobatics that sometimes goes into navigating urban life in India. And so that's the kind of gist of it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining. Now let me pass it over to Bia and Sarah. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, PRX, for having us. We're excited to be back. I'm Sarah Azoubel. I'm a biologist PhD. I'm a biology PhD turned science journalist, and I started 37 Graus together with Bia Guimarães, who is also my co-host and co-everything on the podcast, around 2018. We both host, produce, edit, do everything on the show. The show is named 37 Graus. 37 Graus means 37 degrees in Celsius because we're in Brazil, which is the average temperature of the human body. So everybody asks us what our name is, and that's what it is. We chose this name because it fuses like science and human stories, and our show is a narrative science podcast. Most of the time, this means that we get to follow our curiosity. So we would get curious about something like what happened to Zika anyway, or why do we keep seeing this guy's name around our city and we have no idea who he is? And then we go around and investigate and find the answers. So I think, Dia, do you want to take it from there?
Hi, everyone. So yeah, we try to find stories that I like, Brazilian stories, even when it's like a bigger theme or subject. So we had 4 seasons until now, and our current season is about time. Because we just thought we can't travel anywhere, let's time travel. And so we have an episode about the theory of relativity, but it's not like the general history of this theory is about like how Sobral, a small town in northeastern Brazil, was like crucial to Einstein to prove his theory. So we always trying to find the Brazilian, I don't know, the Brazilian gem, the Brazilian secret behind stories, especially now that like we're answering bigger questions because we can't just travel and find the smaller questions.
Thank you both. All right. De Eso No Se Habla team, do you guys want to take it over?
Yeah. We had prepared like a presentation. So I'm just going to show some slides. I'll start and then Laura will talk. Let me see if I can.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yay. Can you see this? Yeah?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so this is our show. It's called De Eso No Se Habla. In English, it means we don't talk about that. And it's so about silences and about how we break them. This show started because we come from a country that is full of silences that come from a political problem that we had in our country, which is a dictatorship that lasted until 1975. And then for us, it was very important to see how the silences that our parents grew up with were inherited by our generation that was born in democracy. So we just finished our first season on Sunday. And we have launched 8 episodes. So we launched a special episode during the pandemic called Radio Silence. It was about the relationship between noise and power during the pandemic, but in general in our world. Then we launched the prologue in September, and we have released 6 regular episodes. Each episode talks about a different kind of silence. So we have family silences, we have like more political silences, we have, this is a silence about like an abortion case that is like the Spanish Roe v. Wade that no one knew about in Spain. So they're all very different topics. It's anthologized, but they're all linked by the fact that there are silences. I think, yeah, we have some more slides, but we'll talk about that later. Laura, do you want to go on?
So I'm Laura. I'm in De Eso No Se Habla. I was the engagement editor and also editor. And creating a community was also very important for us because we have this intuition that there was a void regarding like non-fiction podcasts and storytelling podcasts here in Spain. So we wanted to check if people were actually willing for stories, and we confirmed this. We made a lot of IRL activities to engage a flock of early birds that could be activated like afterwards to spread the word about the podcast, and it really worked. Now we have this small community of people in social media that are actually talking about their silences. This is beautiful. We get a lot of emails and messages of people saying like, oh, this made me think about my personal secrets, about my family secrets. So we really think that our intuition was right, and this country is willing to talk about the things we didn't usually talk about.
Thank you both. Thank you all. Okay, cool. So thank you for the introduction. So we're going to go into some prepared questions for this next section. I'd love to learn more about how the shows evolved creatively and stylistically, since the time that you guys participated in the Google program, which was this past December 2019. How that program kind of influenced the way you guys have changed the show, and maybe so like what things that you had to learn on your own and what things were helpful in your journey outside of the program. Let's start with City of Women. Sam and Radhika, do you guys want to take it over?
Sure, I can take this one. We had a pretty different concept. I mean, not different in the sense that the show is really meant to capture the experiences of what it's like being a woman in public spaces in the city. And so we had designed the show around a lot of street side activities. loitering basically to different parts of the city. And we really wanted to see what it was like when, if we took our microphones out and did a silly activity with a woman we were interviewing, what would happen? Because we all know that there's a lot of spontaneity on the streets of the city. There's just so many people where we live, and like there's just constantly something or the other that you can almost like count on happening. And so a lot of what we wanted to do was just trying to like sort of use that spontaneousness of just being out in the streets and interacting randomly with people, and see how we could kind of bring that into these stories. And each episode was meant to be centered around a single character, her experiences, her stories. And at the end of it, we'd go wandering around the city and doing something silly with her, just for the sake of being out, just because in India, there are a lot of rules about public space and women and behavior and where you can go, where you can't go, what you're allowed to do, how you should dress. And so it was also sort of taking all of those received, warnings that we would have heard our whole lives, most women internalize, and just play with a little bit and see what actually happens when we not intentionally try to take them on, but just see what, how illustrate how it actually operates. But then, of course, we went into lockdown and we had to change our entire approach to the show. And so we spent a lot of time building a community around the show using social media. We had just released a trailer, so we used that. And then we spent a lot of time collecting little audio clips from women, in response to questions that we would ask on social media about, did you ever experience something like this? Did you ever experience something like that? Just kind of asking these little prompt-like questions. And that kind of helped to bring a community of people around the idea of the show and build the thesis for it a little bit. And then we kind of used that to do these kind of weekly what we would call cocktail hours, where we would just, on Friday evenings, we'd say, hey, if you want to just tell us more about the story that you shared on social media, talk to us for like an hour. And that was kind of how we built up, because it was difficult to get access to people and access to stories when we were in a pretty strict lockdown situation. And that's kind of how it grew. We kind of did these interviews and collected these stories, and it grew and grew and grew. And then we realized there were these interesting themes we could build episodes around. And that was sort of how it evolved.
And I have a follow-up to that. So you talked a lot of, in your podcast, you do a lot of field interviewing. And so I guess there's always a lot of questions that I get in these webinars related to audience feedback versus taste, your own taste as podcast producers. And I know that's something that we also talk a lot about in the program. So I was wondering if you can talk about your process for how to work with establishing who your audience is, or how you want to design your podcast, and how that changes in response to audience feedback.
Well, I feel like we're still a little bit early into the first season and things are kind of evolving, but we did slightly indulge ourselves. It could have been because of the lockdown, and we just kind of decided to do whatever we wanted to do. And so far the response has been okay. And if you listen to any of our other shows, this is a huge departure, and we've just been trying to be as experimental as we can with it and see how people respond, because this is a new and emerging kind of medium for India as well. So it's not like people have a very clear idea of what podcasts can be like. A lot of people who speak English in this country listen to NPR shows, and they're very sort of like used to that style, but maybe not sure of how it would translate if somebody here was making it. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Radhika.
Yeah, I would add that. So the whole POV exercise that is very, very strong and emphasized a lot during the program was quite helpful to us. I mean, one thing that's quite striking for us is that the thesis of the show, or the idea of the show, actually hasn't changed from when we applied to the program. Although the idea of what the show is in our, and what it looks like in our heads is completely changed. It's a 360-degree complete pivot. And
sorry,
I think,
Radhika, sorry to interrupt. Do you mind describing the point of view or the POV, or like what that is,
sure.
real quickly?
So one of the exercises as part of the program, which is sort of, if you are making a show, you can't make it for everyone. You have to pretty much identify a person and a human being and give them, and hopefully they are a real person. So you don't have to give them a name and a face. They already have a name and a face and identity and their likes and dislikes. And really you're making the show for them. So it's very important that they kind of become the arbiter of like what's in, what's out. Obviously you don't have them next to you. You don't sort of like file all your questions their way, but you kind of always think, what would this person like? Would they like this? Would they not like that? It's a great way for working through if you are sort of working as a team and you don't agree. But so I think we did have that very clearly of like, we did identify our POV quite early on. It was a bit bewildering for us as to why we're doing this, but that has stayed very steadfast through the 5-6 episodes that we've put out. And what you'll see, what Samyuktha said, is that each episode has a very different kind of style, although it all sounds the same. I mean, it's all City of Women, but you know, the kind of the protagonist, the voice, the way it's being narrated, the storyline, the arc, I mean, the style, it's very different in every single episode. And I think that's what we like about it. And that's what she means when she says that we're really experimenting and having fun, because at the end of it, we still have that POV, and so it still stays within a universe of a particular tone and voice and taste, but it's all kind of different. I mean, the 5 episodes are fairly different in the way they describe the machinations and the mental acrobatics that women have to go through. In the end, it's all mental acrobatics and machinations, but they're all different women and they're all different stories and styles.
Thank you. Excuse me. 36 Graus and De Eso No Se Habla. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that, like your journey after the program, and takeaways from the program, or things that you also had to kind of navigate on your own?
Can I just say, like, when we first arrived at the podcast garage, like when you guys, the PRX team, asked us, like, what is your show about? Who is it for? Like, what's your role? We were like, oh my God, like nobody had never asked me those questions before. I don't know how to answer to that. So yeah, I think it was important for us, like, to know who we are, what we're doing, what is 37 Graus about, and like, those things are super basic, but we had no idea before. So I think that was super important.
Are you gonna talk, Sarah?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay. Actually, it's been very interesting to prepare for this webinar, because Laura and I were looking at our query reviews, all of our slides that we did and everything that we thought of the show before. And it's funny, on one side, I feel what Bia just said, that, we didn't know anything. But at the same time, I think it was the same for all of us. Like, we knew it so well. It was like all our intuitions were confirmed afterwards. So we were looking at our creative review today, like the creative review 0, when we knew nothing about our shows, and everything was there, like the format of the show, the tone of the show. So maybe it wasn't defined and refined, but everything we kind of wanted to do. Of course, we had the pandemic, which changed some things, but I think stylistically and the show, or the spirit of the show, was the same. And that's very comforting. Like, if you work, because for me, actually, I have to thank like the training team, because the work I did before, like to apply, was so important for me. Like, it really made me like think what the show was about, what I wanted to make, and that was really something invaluable. Like, I remember Mark Pagan saying, like, finish your application, no matter what, just finish your application, because it will help you think. And yeah, and definitely it worked. And then one other thing that we were thinking this morning, Laura and I, was the prototypes, like learning to prototype and learning that something doesn't have to be perfect to test it, and that you have to have like something that is right to test it. Like, for us, that was, I mean, I think we still think of that every day. Like, let's prototype this, let's see if it works. And we work with prototypes so much. Like, we make at least 10 people listen to our episode, or 15 people listen to our episodes before launching. And we have like, their insights, and then we we found out what doesn't work. So that really helped us think about the show. I don't know if Laura wants to add something.
Yeah, just a real thing regarding communication and engagement that I think that might be useful for this audience that we have here that come from very different places. Something that was a challenge was like translating everything we learned to our specific contexts. And in terms of media, social media, and industry, this was like something that we had to think a lot about, because you learn like all these useful things about the specific US environment, and then you have to like have a look at your own and try to adapt things and really think what would work here. And I think this was an interesting exercise that I like invite everybody to do in their specific countries and contexts.
Thank you. And I know, sorry, excuse me, my voice today. I know for the Eso No Se Habla, you guys have the Spanish version of your show, and then also a translated version with a subtitled version video. So it's well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but it's cool to see how that's kind of how you've been able to adapt to your audience. Sarah, did you want to add anything before we go on to the next question?
No, I think everybody covered everything. I think if there's one thing that we like do is that we still remember like some of the advice we took like almost every day, but like what Laura said, like we just like apply everything on our day to day, but we're in Brazil, so the scenario of the podcast is different. So a lot of it is kind of an adaptation of what we learned. So like we're still kind of a very broad topic podcast. And I know for the US, you always like advocate for a really specific POV or really specific kind of story. But if that space is not taken where you are, where you can be the broad topic podcast, you can also do that. But then we like get all of our advice and like adapt it that way. So it is kind of a juggle that you have to apply and see what works for you. But I think it was a really valuable experience for us to have the time to stop and like actually experiment and think about what we were doing, because we were in our second season when we joined the program. So we were already launching episode after episode, and then we had the chance to like, okay, like let's slow down and like rethink a lot of what we were doing. And we do things a lot differently now. So I think it's a good idea for people to just like take some moments to stop and like look back at what they're doing and what they want to do differently. So
thank you. And Laura kind of touched upon this. This idea that like, you know, we in the program, we learned a lot about the US side of things, and then how do you adapt it to your region? And you all come from different regions. And so my next question is, how do you navigate being an independent podcaster in the podcasting landscape of your respective countries? And, you know, what are the things that you had to kind of learn on your own, and or things that you found to be helpful, especially when it might not be as developed in terms of the number of podcasters and the number of stakeholders in the industry? How do you navigate that? Let's start with Isabel.
It's actually also been very interesting I think that's how you build a narrative, by looking back and saying, I was right, because maybe if it was another way, we would say the same thing. But from the beginning, we felt like we tried to talk to people who had like podcast production companies or networks, and then at the same time we wanted to be independent. So there was this, you know, you cannot be independent and be part of a network. So we were, this tension was always there. And then we just naturally decided to launch by ourselves, and to also the pandemic really made us like be independent. And it's been amazing. It's been like, I don't think we could have done everything we've done without being independent, but also we had a slide prepared, but their slides are not working, but we have had like so much recognition in this like season, not only from the audience, but also from the professionals. And that has been like, wow, we were right. We had to do this thing the way we wanted to do it. And also we had to do it being independent. And that's been like, a confirmation that it sounds like a little bit mystical, but like if you really do what you want to do and what you really feel is missing in the landscape, and you do it well, like you can make it. So for us, it was, I mean, it was like a blessing to be able to, yeah, I'm very mystical today. It's like a blessing.
That's great. I feel like
to be independent.
That's just part of the creative process. But can you give an example of what the what forms of confirmation you've received, or what's the thing that you were maybe doubting or not sure about, and what was the confirmation?
We didn't know if the audience in Spain would like a long form narrative nonfiction show. Like our episodes are like 40 minutes long. They come bi-weekly. It's a short season because, you know, I mean, I think all our seasons are the same here, like City of Women and Graus. But it's a short season because it's very, like, you know, there's a lot of work behind. And we didn't know how people were going to take it. And okay, so it's hard to talk about oneself, but our first season won like a special mention in the Ondas prizes, which are like the Oscars here in Spain for audio and television. And we were really not expecting that at all. And that was our first episode. And also maybe Laura will talk about that later with engagement. But at the beginning, we were pushing forward for like press to talk about us. And then it just came naturally. Like it was like we were covered by like not every, but by many newspapers and magazines. And yeah, and Laura will talk about that later, I think. And we were invited to conferences, and we were like, yeah. Sorry, we had a very hard time at the beginning. So now it's like, yeah.
Thank you.
People like our show.
That's awesome. Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Sure, I can. You know, I think when we started podcasting in like 2016, it was a fairly new and emerging market. I mean, India is still an emerging market for podcasts, but it is a huge market. I think it's one of the biggest, I think, along with Brazil, emerging markets. And I think even in India, there's a lot of momentum. And even in the 4 years that we've been doing this, we've seen a huge transformation, you know, whether it's in the number of players, the range and diversity of stakeholders that are in here, and you have platforms, and you have, you know, independent podcasters. And I think what for us, what we keep telling ourselves is I think independence is very important, because we came to making podcasts and working in audio, having worked previously in, you know, in other sectors. And so we sort of, you know, we already had a career. And I think we were very clear when we came into podcasting as to why we wanted to do this and really what we wanted to make. So I think for us, I mean, to be able to survive and to be able to, I mean, at least look back and say, okay, now we've grown from one show to, you know, a portfolio of shows. It is really, really, especially as creators, to be independent and really, really stay true to what you're doing and why you want to do this. I think we also made the decision very early on to go into this full time. So it's the stakes are very high. It's a very different ball game if you're, you know, doing this on the side while you're doing other work, or whether you're when you're actually trying to establish yourself as a production company and do this full time. So I mean, I think the one thing is just stay true to your creative process and what it is you want to make. And I think that's the only thing that's going to keep you going forward, really.
I can jump in. So I think Bea and I flirted with like joining a podcast network, and it didn't really go well for us. But we decided eventually that we wanted to stay independent. And I think if you're in a landscape like ours, there's only a few podcast networks that you could join anyway. It's not like this space is not filled with podcast networks. And there was basically nobody doing exactly what we were doing. And my advice for someone who's thinking about joining a network would be to make sure what you're doing aligns with what they're doing, and what you want to do, and the direction you want to go aligns where they want to go. Because Bea and I also jumped into this full time, so this is our career now. And what we found out was basically it was better for us to retain all control over production and distribution and marketing, and then be able to kind of having a product that was completely new where we are, and kind of creating our own strategies to how to grow and what content do we want to put out into the world, then trying to fit what we were trying to do into like another mold that was around, which didn't really fit us. So so for us, it just works better when we're doing it, in a way, I think it would be different if you had the chance to go on networks that had like a amazing shows that were like really aligned with what you do, and people were doing cross promotions and everything was working out. So that might be something that is good for certain people. But then in a scenario where there's few opportunities to do that, maybe just taking it into your own hands, because you know where it's going, just seems to have worked better for us.
Thank you. Actually, my next question is related to that. And so if you don't mind, let's stick on that question. So the next question is, how has your thinking around marketing and audience growth and engagement changed over time? And Sarah, you were talking about how, you talked about promotion and things, but yeah, tell us about how you've been working on audience engagement marketing.
Yeah, so this is kind of new because now this year Brazil exploded with narrative podcasts. So there's a bunch of new ones, but when we first started, there's maybe like two, and maybe two professionally produced ones. So there wasn't much of an industry. The industry is kind of happening now in the past year or two. So it was hard to market ourselves and promote and all that kind of thing because one, we didn't really have a network. We're not like an NPR show where you can just put an ad, and like other NPR shows are the same with like Radiotopia or something like that. And also we are not a chat cast which can just like invite other famous like podcast hosts to come on your show, because that's how most people are doing it. They just have famous guests, or they just exchange participation with other shows. So we had kind of more limited range of what we could do with being a narrative podcast. And what we recently started doing was actually buying ad time in other shows, which actually it like surprises everyone that we ask for. we contacted like show hosts and like, hey, can we buy an ad on your show? And they're like, what? Like, don't you just want to come over and like talk? And we're like, no, we actually want to buy an ad on your show because it's important for us to like put our show out there, and we can't just like have everybody back on our show. Like there's just not that space. So we're kind of creating that, and the industry is kind of creating its own ways that can promote. I think we've started doing a lot more organized social media stuff. And it's kind of one of your questions, I know, is about delegation, and it's kind of hard because there's so many tasks, and we are a small company. We're like Bia and I, and then we have a little bit of help. But I think we've been thinking more like what we found that works for us is mainly two things: word of mouth and showing, like being heard on other shows, in other podcasts. Like that has like an immediate translation into bigger audience, and so that's kind of what we've been kind of focusing most of our attention to. For audience engagement, we have kind of special shows, like bonus shows that we do where we answer listener questions, or for some special episodes, we'll ask our audience to send us little stories, like little audio stories, and then sometimes we'll like include those in the show, because that's the way we found that we can kind of, like kind of have a conversation back and forth with the audience, even though we're not like a conversation podcast.
Any other teams want to jump in on that related to marketing, audience growth, and engagement? Okay, yeah, Laura,
yeah.
please.
So in fact, for us, this was one of the things that required this kind of adaptation to the context that I was talking about before. We had a strategy, we had a plan, and also here we found that our intuitions were confirmed. We had organized the strategy in 3 phases: pre-launch, launch, and then the regular season. In the first phase, we focused on creating this community I was talking about before, mostly with IRL events. We had like story dinners, listening dinner parties, but also we placed ads in newspapers, in traditional media, or we had a phone where people could like phone to tell us stories. So we were working on content and engagement at the same time in order to like prepare the context to launch. Then when the launch came, we activated like these communities through social media. We renewed the image of our accounts in Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything. And we also worked like harder with press and traditional media. And we had some impact, but not a lot. And then came the third phase where all like was put together, and we found out that it was working, and it was like really related to content. I mean, we had this powerful social media strategy with a lot of materials and videos and images and everything, and it helped. But it was when the content came when it really like exploded. We had, as Isabel said before, we had a lot of media covered us. We were also in festivals, and we had this prize and everything, but it was always like related to specific episodes. We, for instance, in media, in traditional media, we tried to find like journalists that were focused on special like issues. For instance, we have this episode that is about prisons, so we call this person, or we have this which is about feminism, we call this person, and it worked like focused on content. And another discovery we made was that, well, not discovery, we knew that, but then we like confirmed it. We were focusing on media, on traditional media, and that was not the way. The way was influencers. Like the day that an influencer posts a story on Instagram, that's the day. Like much more than traditional media, like newspapers and everything. This and these surprises like the prize and so on. But in general, we followed our strategy, it worked, and then we had these little surprises that helped.
Thank you, Laura. Perfect. In the City of Women, do you guys want to add anything? And my next question is for you guys too. So.
Okay, great. Yes, so we have this excellent third member of our team, Menaka Raman, who is our she was our POV, and then we hired her because she was such a good POV for the show. And so she basically is the brains behind our kind of social media strategy. And we knew that we needed, what we were trying to do was build an audience for that we thought would be interested in the show, but also interested to the point where they would actually contribute their own stories. So we had this very clear objective. We don't just want you to just come and listen to the show. We want you to feel compelled to tell us a crazy incident that you had on the streets, or something that happened, or, so we had the trailer up, and then we had this our social media pages and Instagram pages. And then we started, when the lockdown started, we kind of started softly with these kinds of simple questions about, how are you negotiating space in your home? We asked about, what are you fantasizing about as soon as you're allowed to go out on the streets again? And then we kind of tried to took a really gentle tone, I think, to try to get people then to talk about incidents that they had experienced, or stories that they might, that have lingered through their lives. Because we realized that the things that we wanted to talk about in City of Women had this problem thing, which is the fact that they're so normalized and they're so almost just part of daily life that people don't always think about them as things that we should be talking about. They don't just stand out in relief in people's brains because it's so much a part of the daily kind of coping of living in big cities in India so it was also trying to coax women to share their stories. And that was a lot of what the objective of the social media strategy was. It was to say, if I share, will you share? And that kind of tone. So we would get these little clips from women, and then we would just put them back out on social media so people could hear them as little audiograms and stuff. So they were just sort of a reflection again of what we were getting from the audience. And that really helped, I think, to develop strengthen our kind of thesis. We just knew how to ask questions better, but it also just gave, we were trying to mirror, basically, that was what we were trying to do. We were trying to reflect back, but do it in a way where the tone was not too dark. It wasn't too just depressing. And that was actually that's a difficult thing to do, especially in these last months when people are having so many emotions. And we second guessed a lot of our content and wondered, is this the right time to put it out? How do we give it the right sense of safe, like you're in a safe place to share these stories. We can laugh about it. Let's remember that, this is the kind of attitude we need to have to keep going and carry on. So that was what a lot of our discussions about social media sounded like.
Thank you. So Radhika, I'm going to ask you guys the next question, which is about monetization. So yeah, how do you think about funding? How do you think about, and I know you guys have worked with clients as well in terms of making audio for them. Can you talk about, your thinking around monetization and funding?
Sure. So I can take this one. I think we think monetization is important. Shows need to be funded. I think all our shows have been funded so far. And I think what we try to do is, it's always a mix. I think City of Women is supported by the Google Podcast Creator Program. Some of our other shows are either made in partnership where, clients approach us and they finance or they support part of it. I think it's a mixed bag, really. And I think it depends on what kind of show you're making and who your audience is. And that kind of determines who's going to fund your show as well, and where and how you're going to monetize it. For example, In the Field is a show that's very much about the development sector. So we actually look to the people in the development sector to support the show. And we have a mix of I think in our first season, we had a mix of sort of individuals supporting the show, as well as we got a grant from a philanthropic organization to support it. Since then, we've been approached by other foundations as well to support either, portions or episodes on City of Women or mini-series, not on City of Women, pardon me, on In the Field. So I think monetization is important. And I think sorry, it's not a very useful answer, I suppose, because everyone wants like that one silver bullet. There isn't one. You have to really think about what your show is about, who's going to listen to it, and then see who would then best support it. And that could just be sort of raising the funds yourself or identifying good supporters, sponsors for the show you're making.
And I know you guys work, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I know you guys work a lot with, nonprofits, philanthropies, with, partly because of your background and connections in that world. Yeah,
so Samyuktha and I both have worked in the not-for-profit sector and the development sector for many years. And so we did have a good network in here. I think also when we started out, we did have a very good sort of sense of what kind of show this kind of audience would want to listen to. So it was not easy, I would say, but it was fairly straightforward, going and talking to people in potential philanthropic organizations and saying, look, this is a real need in the sector, and would you be able to support us through it? That didn't mean that we didn't follow. We did have to go through a fairly long process of being vetted and focus groups and this and that and the other. And I think In the Field came out months after that process. But I think for us, it helped that we are kind of we are embedded within this network, and it's also the nature of the shows we make. We aren't yet making purely commercial shows. I mean, even City of Women at its heart is about a societal issue, so we are able to tap into our networks. That's one advice I would give people, is to tap into the networks that you already have access to, especially in markets that are not as well established, like say the US market. And I know, for example, Graus is trying out other different sorts of monetization strategies, and it's really kind of like putting the pulse.
Thank you. Do you guys want to pick that up, Graus? Sarah, Bia?
Yeah, I think like for now, I don't think we can sustain our show without the grants we have. So we had the GPcp grant, and we have a Science Foundation grant, which was renewed for this year and now for the next year. So yay. So yeah, we have that. We also run courses and consulting sessions for other shows that will be created. And we are thinking about like having donations from our audience in the future. And our last season, Epidemia season, about the Zika epidemic, we released that season with Folha de São Paulo, which is the biggest newspaper here in Brazil. So they actually they covered like a part of the span of the season. So yeah, but we are still like figuring it out. Like, do we want to produce shows for other people? Like, we are still like talking about that and understanding what we want to do with our production company, because yeah, we also have a production company called Lab 37. So yeah.
Yeah, we have to always like think about our like time to the money ratio sort of. So we kind of pick and choose sometimes which kind of work we do outside of the podcast to have like maximum returns, because otherwise you can also get caught into making a lot of things for other people, and then you do get some money from that, but also you have to spend so many hours working on that, and our show is basically a full-time job as well. So we've been kind of fine-tuning like which avenues of like other income work best for us. And we've found that education and courses is a really good one, based on our like time investment and our returns.
Cool, thank you. I'm just checking on the time. There's so much information to fit it into 1 hour. Are you guys okay with staying on for a little longer for Q&A? Isabel, would you be okay with that? Yeah, okay, cool. Everyone's okay. Saw everyone nodding. Okay, so we're gonna push it. So I'm gonna start, we're gonna share some of the audios real quick, audio clips from each of the teams. And then we'll try to do some of the Q&As. And apologies to everyone. This will run over the hour mark, but let me get this prepped. 1 sec. So we're gonna share. 1 second. Share this guy. So. All right, so we're going to start with 37 Graus. Anything you want to say before we launch in? Nope? Good, okay.
Esse episódio começa mais de 100 anos atrás, na manhã do dia 29 de maio de 1919, em Sobral, no interior do Ceará. Se perto das 8 horas da manhã daquele dia, um completo desavisado aparecesse na Praça do Patrocínio, lá em Sobral, ia levar um susto. Pro bem ou pro mal. Ou ia achar que uma coisa muito boa estava para cair do céu, ou ia achar que o mundo estava chegando ao fim. Você tava lá, o que você viu? O que você lembra desse dia?
Lembro de praticamente tudo. Da população da cidade correndo para as igrejas, pensando que o mundo ia acabar. Dos galos cantando fora de hora. Dos 100 números de braços apontando para o sol.
Ou melhor, apontando para o sumiço do sol. Aquelas pessoas nunca tinham visto um eclipse solar. E as histórias antigas diziam que aquilo era mau agouro, sinal que coisa ruim estava vindo aí. Então devia ter gente achando que não ia ficar vivo para contar a história. A ansiedade foi crescendo.
E ao eclipse total,
foi um misto de medo e encanto. O dia virou noite, a temperatura caiu.
Fez-se um silêncio absoluto.
E pelos próximos 5 minutos, a praça inteira ficou olhando para cima.
Dava para ouvir até o estalido seco das máquinas fotográficas, como música.
Era como se tivesse um anel de luz no céu. Só dava para ver as bordinhas do sol escapando do contorno da lua. Pro alívio geral, todo mundo voltou para casa são e salvo quando o fenômeno acabou. A vida podia seguir em frente e voltar ao normal. Menos pros caras que estavam tirando as fotos. Para eles, a história estava só começando. Naquele momento, ainda não dava para ter certeza. Ainda tinha que revelar, examinar direitinho, fazer comparações. Mas eles torciam para que aquelas fotos fossem capazes de mudar tudo. Para que aqueles 5 minutinhos de 29 de maio de 1919 durassem muito mais do que isso e mudassem tudo de lugar. Até o tempo.
Adoro.
Cool, thank you. Anything you want to say before we share the next one? Tell us about the clip.
Oh, so yeah, this is a clip about our story from Sobral, which is Bia told you guys a little bit about before, which is how this little town in the northeast of Brazil was was the place where Einstein's theory of relativity was proved. So we kind of interviewed time itself. So we had like a fictional character come in, which you guys heard. And also we kind of try to bring our listeners into those, into that scene where people were actually scared. And we, throughout the episode, we have like newspaper clips and stuff. So it was kind of our first episode of the season, which started during the pandemic. So it was when we kind of crystallized this idea that we would have to travel through time because we couldn't leave the house. And then, but we wanted our listeners to keep having this experience of being transported into somewhere else, someplace else when they listen to the podcast. So that's what we were trying to do there.
Thank you, Sarah. Cool. All right, we're gonna share 2 clips from this on Isabel. I'm gonna share them first and then I'll pass it over to Isabel. 1 second. Isabel and Laura, 1 second.
Colonia, Alemania, 1975.
Tiempos de dolor, de paseos a la muerte.
Un cantante español sube al escenario.
Vidas eternas de resistencia valiente.
Lo presentan como Pedro Faura, el cantante de la resistencia antifranquista.
De continuar luchando.
El público aplaude, corea canciones que la mayoría no comprende.
Moriremos peleando, levantemos nuestras armas.
Solo que él no es exactamente Pedro Faura.
Por supuesto, ya no era yo. Va a parecer absurdo, pero es que yo no era yo en aquel momento, aunque sí que era yo.
Y solo que el suyo no es el único nombre falso en esta historia. Este es un episodio sobre coincidencias que atraviesan Europa contando la historia con mayúsculas de este siglo. Es la historia de un padre y un hijo que tuvieron vidas cruzadas, pero desde convicciones opuestas. Pero ellos no lo sabían, porque nunca hablaron de ello. Esta es una historia de silencios y es también una historia de música. Soy Isabel Cadenas Cañón. Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a De Eso No Se Habla. Así que durante los próximos 25 minutos yo me voy a callar y lo que vais a escuchar es eso, un diario, un acceso en primera persona a la vida de una mujer en ese lugar al otro lado del estrecho.
No hay bares, ni sitios así de ocio.
Un lugar al que nos unen muchas cosas, pero sobre todo eso,
la vida aquí,
un gran silencio.
Familia, familia, casa, casa, familia, familia, casa, casa, familia.
Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a De Eso No Se Habla.
Me estoy preparando una máscara, que según mi hermana me tengo que cuidar el cutis. Me debo cuidar el cutis. Yo en realidad paso. Si es que con agua y jabón ya está. Pero no, según ella no. Porque el día de mañana te tienes que casar, no sé qué. Que te tienes que embellecer para tu futura marido. Mierda.
Awesome, thank you. Isabel, Laura, do you guys want to tell us a bit about those 2 clips?
Yeah, we wanted to show just 2 short clips because our episodes are very different and some of them are narrated and some of them are not narrated. So the first one was a narrated episode and it's about a man who's not himself, who has to change his name, but also he finds out later that his father also had to change his name 30 years before and they had like a parallel life because he was a Nazi and he didn't know. It's not a spoiler because we say it at the beginning. But other things are discovered throughout the episode. And I mean, for us, it was important to play this one because we also work a lot with found archives. So for instance, this the song that was played was not, the quality was not very good, but it's because this so this singer was undercover and he had to like bring the cassette from France, where he was playing, to Spain in 1976, and this was the first time he was listening to the tape when we had it on our show. So it was like very important for us to keep this quality of like, a bad tape and bad sound. So that's the first episode, and then our second clip, sorry, the first clip, and the second clip is a red diary of Radhika. Laura, do you want to say anything about this? Or it's a girl, it's a woman. We sent her a recorder to a refugee camp in Western Sahara, which was a colony of Spain, and now it's a refugee camp since 1976 as well. 75, a very important date in Spanish history. And we just sent her a recorder, and she recorded herself for several months, and then we made this episode. And it was our second episode, and it was very interesting to see like how people really loved to have like a non-narrated episode, and to have just like a character, a person talk about her life. Of course, we did a lot of editing and sound design, but it had like a very warm welcome here in Spain, and that's our second episode. So we wanted to show like our different formats.
Thank you. Before we launch into the next one, so again, sorry we're running over time. Next time I know to allot more time for, when we have so many great panelists. So I will ask some of the questions later, and it will be recorded. So I'm sorry if you cannot stay for the rest of it. We'll try to get through some of them, and this will be recorded and posted onto our website. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next clip from the City of Women. Wait, do you so before we start, Radhika, you want to say anything real quick?
Sure. We'll present the clip after everyone's listened to it, but just a shout out. This clip has a bit of rough language, so
cool.
Listeners, do whatever you have to do.
Yeah, feel free to mute us, turn the volume down. There's some language, but listeners beware. Okay.
And of course, I spoke to him in Telugu, and it sounds far worse than it is in English. All of this sounds very, very polite and polished, a bit too polite and polished for how disgusting and crude it actually is. But, well, to reach out to more people in English.
Do you want to say a line in Telugu? Go ahead. Wow.
Okay, so let's say them in a very dignified manner. Mother chod, bhen chod. In Telugu, there's Lanja Munda. Okay, Lanja is a whore. Then there's Vedhava Munda, which is, Vedhava is widow. Munda is used only for women, and it's a derogatory term. It's not used with love and affection. I suppose it's used for women who are considered loose charactered or whatever, not nice. Even in Marathi, there's this very interesting one that I don't remember the whole thing. Tucha aichi puchi mirchi something, which basically means chili up your mother's vagina. I mean, why? In Bengali, there's a really nice one, which is something about a tik-tiki, which is a lizard up your bum. We should have a lexicon of cuss words that are not cussing somebody's mother or women in general.
Agreed. No, but Radhika and Sam, you guys want to tell us a little bit about that clip?
Sure. This is a clip from our third episode. It's called Guts. And the episode is essentially about, you hear this phrase a lot about women, oh, she's got guts. She's got guts to go out like this. She's got guts to do this outside. And it's an episode where, we feature 3 women who I don't think essentially see themselves as gutsy at all. And the voice you hear is our second protagonist. Her name is Deepika. She's a fantastic woman from Hyderabad. And she tells this, I would say fairly common, but really fantastic story of how she was out and about on the street one day, and she chases a man down a street because he was taking photographs of herself and her group without her consent. It's a great episode. I would encourage all of you to listen to it. to that, Samyuktha? Do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, so she catches the guy and then she wants to say all of these bad things to him and call him names, but then she's running through all the bad words she knows in her head and realizes that every single one of them is more insulting to her than it would be to him. So that's kind of what we wanted to show, because it was an interesting moment where she was like, I'm so angry right now. I just want to tear him to bits and call him all these words that I know, but I just can't. So that was kind of the moment we picked to share.
Thank you all. Okay, no, thank you very much for sharing the audio clips and for answering my questions. Now I'm gonna spend like 5 minutes or so to go over some of the Q&A. I'm trying to make this a lightning round. I'm sorry to thank you for adapting with me here. So the first questions to all teams. How would you relaunch your podcast if after listening to the first episode and attending webinars like this one, it's necessary to take different approach to fix it, to make it better? How do you, relaunch, or do you relaunch? Anyone want to take that? I'll pick on Sam.
Well, my advice would be just move on as quickly as possible and try not to revisit anything you've made in the past. I mean, I definitely suffer from this, where I constantly want to fix things. But if you can erase the memory of it and just look forward, I would suggest you do that, because it only gets better over time, right? I mean, with more shows you make.
Any other thoughts before we move on to the next question? Cool. Okay, next question. How long did it take from inception to first episode? Could you provide like a broad timeline of how things progress on a week-by-week basis? Like, what were your deadlines, targets? So this one, let's maybe Sarah and Bia, you guys want to take that one on?
I think when we first started, like our deadlines were like we need to have a first episode, then we need to have a second episode. We didn't have like a long-term schedule. So I would recommend people like to have, I don't know, 5 or 6 episodes, even if it's like the idea and a few interviews, like before even thinking about launching. But I think like the important thing to do before in this like this moment where you are still understanding what you want to do is talking to potential listeners, like having this pitch, this like elevator pitch, this small phrase that you that can explain your podcast to other people. So with that, I think you can like start to understand like what kind of story is like a good fit for my show, which is like, without that, I would not recommend you to like start producing episodes and spending money.
And also, I think, well, something like if you're going to make if you want to make a professional podcast, if this is going to be your life, what Bia said, like try producing some pilots, but don't publish them until they're like, they don't have to be perfect at all. Ours weren't, but like until they're just like good enough that you can do something with them, because this will work to your favor later. Like if you want to like look for a grant, if you're gonna talk to someone to see if you can get funded, if you want to get some press or anything, you need to be like the minimal quality, like for all those things to happen. So I would advise to like experiment privately and then like launch publicly.
Thank you. Okay, so next question, if that's okay. The next question is, are you all in your different contexts able to pay yourselves at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
Isabel?
I mean, in our case, we had the fellowship from PRX, and we also had a fellowship from Madrid, from the city council, but we still don't know anything about the second season. So if we don't find a way to sustain ourselves for a second season, we won't have a second season. So we have to. So we were very lucky in the first season because we had like Google Podcast Creator Program money. But also one thing I wanted to say. because we talk about this a lot, it's like sustainability is about money, and it's also about not dying while producing, and like not spending your whole life producing an episode, which is something that we do, but we're looking forward not to do, like to find ways to sustain your mental health and your personal well-being and your social life and your friends, and that's very important. And I think our mentor Jonathan Zenti talked to us about this, and we were like, yeah, whatever. And then, I mean, for us it's been very hard to produce this first season because we were working like a lot of hours, like crazy. So that's also like the other part of sustainability.
For sure. No, thank you. And the next question is, can you tell us anything about the mixture of let me see. Okay, I got it. So how did you decide to do something in your native language versus English for a larger global reach? And I don't know if, I know again, Isabel, you and Laura, you guys have, translation. So any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know if there's languages that are larger than Spanish and Portuguese. Like, they're very large languages. And also, like when you're producing, I mean, I would like to ask this person the question, like, why would this person produce a show in English instead of his or her native language?
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts from Train to Graus and City of Women?
I mean, our audience is like, we're making a show in Brazil, and our audience is Brazilian, so it only makes sense to speak Portuguese on the show. I think it was always the plan. We wonder if someday we can have like some collaboration with other podcasts, or maybe like pitch one of our stories and then do like a special episode in English for like another show, or in Spanish. But our show is here in our audience. We speak the language that our audience speaks. So.
Mm-hmm. I guess City of Women also has a different perspective on this as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we've stopped thinking about the language problem. Everyone talks to us about it. We don't think about it at all. We make the show that we want to make. We consume a lot of other shows from across the world where we may or may not understand parts of them. And we've actually found that's the best way to be. In all our episodes, we have elements of different native languages. I mean, I think in the clip we played for you, there were 4 languages totally that were spoken. And I think we found that as long as you kind of make the show for your POV, and we have a lot of people who don't speak any of those languages listening to our show and really, really enjoying it. Also, I think some of the issues that are more, I mean, all the issues that we talk about in City of Women are universal to women and to men. I mean, we've had men write to us and say, hey, you know what? I know you made the show about women and about a women's experience on the street, but I've had the same experience. So there's kind of a universality to it. And I mean, the short answer is we don't talk about that.
De eso no se habla. God.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, this next question is a fun one. What are podcast tools, whether they be for production, scheduling, or productivity, that you cannot live without? Who would like to go first?
I can say.
Okay, Sarah, I think I
just said Trent, Sarah.
Oh, Trent? Okay, well, sorry, Sarah. Isabel, would you like to talk more about that?
Just Trent.
Trent, just having a program to translate for or transcribe for you. Nice.
Yeah, we use phonics. It works for Portuguese. So we also like the Isotope RX like plugins, like audio plugins a lot. Like they're like the Photoshop of audio repair. So those are great. And we use Milanote, which is like kind of this shared like board thing that you can like share with your coworkers, and we use that a lot to like put different references there and like talk to our coworkers sometimes.
Anything else? Sam and Radhika, do you guys have any other ones?
Google Docs,
WhatsApp,
phones. We're constantly in communication. Have had so. Yeah.
We have a secret tool.
Isabel, yes, please share with us your secret.
Post-its that we use for everything, and that we learned from you. Yeah, but aside from that, we use Trimmed, which is, I don't think we could live without it. And we use Hindenburg to edit, but we're actually maybe transferring because we're having like mixed feelings about Hindenburg lately. So we'll see. But Hindenburg is a great tool for organizing the narrative if you have a narrative podcast.
Awesome. Thank you all. And I'm going to stop the questions there. Sorry to all of you who asked questions and I wasn't able to get to them. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. So again, these webinars are going to be on our website, the googlecp.prx.org. That's googlecp.prx.org. And there you'll be able to find more information about these teams here. These webinars are also complementary to the Podcasting 101 videos on our website.